Hey, Scott Farkas here. Um, doing an update. I know several of you have asked me only about 100 or 200 times to provide an update. I apologize for the last year of being a slacker, and so here's your update. I think one of the reasons I don't haven't created an update is, once you hit whatever you decide is going to be your we'll call it your final resting place as far as a weight. Not a whole lot changes from there. So you just things tend to be about the same. So I haven't really felt like I've had a whole lot to update on. But I think one thing that's important is for people to understand is am I gonna gain the weight back, and um, and obviously what are other people who've had the surgery, what's their experience been. So kind of rolling back in time a little bit. About a year and a half ago, I can't even remember now. I think it's been 2.5 years or something since I've had the procedure. But the lowest weight I ever got to, well, let's start over. My highest weight was 304 pounds. My After having the procedure and putting in all the effort, um, I think my final weight was 194 pounds. And if you remember from probably my last update video or the one before that, I really felt pretty terrible when I got that low. And 194 pounds seems pretty high still to be feeling terrible. But what my doctor and I came up with was that really, with the extra skin that you carry when you lose all that weight, you actually weigh considerably less. I've seen estimates out there somewhere between 20 and 30 pounds of skin, and even the skin that's not just hanging, it kind of becomes, rather than being nice, tight skin, you end up with like kind of this blubbery skin in those places that have stretched. So even where it's not, again, where it's not hanging, it gets pretty loose and thick. So we were estimating that my extra skin probably had me somewhere at about 170-ish pounds at 6'3", and it was probably a little on the light side. And I have no intention, again, of working on any of that loose skin or tightening it up. I don't really care, as I've said before. So if you remember the story, I gained weight back to about 200 pounds, where I felt really good, and I kind of drifted around between 200 and 204 pounds for about a year, and that's where I felt the best. So where does that bring me to today? In the past year, um, what's my weight gain been like? About 7 months ago, I went through the company that I work for went through a pretty big merger. And at the end of it all, I ended up doing twice as much travel as I was already doing. So I was traveling probably every other week of the year. And what that did was it interrupted my exercise routine to where I rarely exercise, if I'm being completely honest. I think that's what everybody wants to hear. Um, I don't exercise like I used to. I'm not running the 5 days a week, 4 days a week for an hour a day. In fact, I have been pretty lazy about some of those things. The result of that over the past 7 months, I've gained about 5 pounds, which I think is pretty impressive. I would have expected to gain more than that. My appetite came down a little bit, obviously, without all the exercise. So I'm not eating as much as I was, but I think I'm still eating a little bit. I would imagine I've also lost a bit of muscle tone and probably put on just a little bit of weight. I'll show you some pictures kind of because you can't get a whole lot of me sitting in this chair here. But I'll in the video here, I'll play some pictures of kind of the last year. As you kind of look through these, you're not going to see a whole lot of difference, in that 5 to 10 pounds I've drifted around. But I do have every intention, kind of as the holidays come around, I get all excited every year. Even before the surgery, I would get all excited and I'd start working out right after New Year's. And so I've already got my plan, and I'd like to get back to kind of, again, that 200, 204. Naturally, I want to do that very carefully. If you're anything like me, sometimes the way we got as big as we get or got has everything to do with diet and exercise. I know that my history was, when I thought I was really big, I was probably 240, 250, and then I would start diet and exercising, and then when I would start eating again and not exercise quite as much, I would gain weight and gain back more than I originally had on, as the body goes into a natural, the body's very intelligent and it tries to protect against starvation. So it's going to add on to what your original weight was, as it adjusts that thermostat to try to calibrate towards protecting against starvation. And if you're like me, you did that over and over again, and every January you'd do a big diet and exercise frenzy, and then you'd lose weight, and then you'd gain it all back, and then you'd add another 5 to 10. And every time you do that, you end up weighing more and more, and that's how I started out at 240 or 250 and ended up at 304 through diet and exercise, believe it or not. The good counsel that all dietitians and weight loss experts will give you is that it's very important that you lose that weight slowly, that you don't do a mad dash. So I have to be careful about that. In fact, I'm going to try to start exercising. I'm actually not going to adjust my diet so much. I might cut out just a little bit of sugar that's in there right now. But my intention would be to exercise more, eat the same, and see if I can lose maybe a pound to 2 pounds a month. My natural instincts are to lose 2 to 5 pounds per week by going all out, and it'll actually, surprisingly, I think it'll take a lot not to go after it in that way and just solve the problem in 4 to 6 weeks, because I think my body will respond to that by trying to go back into that pattern of storing weight. So wish me luck on very carefully losing that 5 to 10 pounds that I've put on. When I did the research before I did the procedure, the doctor that I had said most people gain an average of 20% of the weight back. I don't think I'm quite near that at that point, but I actually did anticipate gaining that back. That was part of my plan, but honestly, I feel really good, again, at about 200, 204, so I've got just a little bit of work to do to lose that 5 to 10. What's my diet like today is one of the questions I get asked a lot. I still do my Premier protein shakes. Even the particular surgeon and dietitian that I used, they stopped recommending Premier protein because of the type of protein that's in it. It's like a milk protein. It's not a soy protein, but it's not a pure whey protein. But and then they were using some sort of I think a while ago they were using some type of a hydrogenated oil or something as a binder, so the protein didn't clump or something in it, and people didn't like that as well. But I think they actually made a change due to some sort of legal stuff in certain states about using hydrogenated oil products, where they've gotten rid of that. I still like it just because those shakes are full of protein, whether or not it's straight pure whey protein, which is also dairy protein. I feel good when I drink them. They're full of nutrition. I still make it a staple of my diet. In fact, that's typically my breakfast every morning. I might add a little something here and there to that, but most often I drink that shake, start trying to get my hydration in, and then I start eating really an early lunch at about 11 o'clock, and then have typically a sensible dinner as well. Let's talk about expansion, like how much can I eat? It's the same as the last time I think we talked, or at least I don't know if you ever read any of my comments. I like to describe it in the size of things, like what I could eat. Not very healthy, but I'm going to use this example anyway. On very, very rare occasions, I will go to Chick-fil-A and get a Chick-fil-A sandwich. My stomach size is about the size of a chewed up Chick-fil-A sandwich. I eat one Chick-fil-A sandwich, just your basic sandwich, the cheap one that they have, and I'm comfortably full. I used to be really full when I would eat that, but I'm still comfortably full even after like a year and a half of being able to eat that. I can also eat, I've heard people after they get a sleeve, there's things that you don't do very well with. Rice is one of those. So at this point, I've always been a sushi lover. I can eat, again, I know sushi comes in all sorts of sizes and types and quantities, but let's just say like a decent, middle of the road sushi roll place where you have maybe 8 pieces of sushi in a roll. That's not massive and not really a small one either, just something right in the middle. I can eat an entire, 8 little pieces of sushi, and I'm pretty full. I might even order a hot and sour soup and eat, like a cup of that and eat maybe half of it, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. And again, I'm comfortably full. I'm not sick. I don't feel awful. I feel like stopping, and I feel pretty good with that. And again, not putting on massive amount of weight, eating whatever size that is. I'm guessing my stomach size is probably, it's definitely not 4 to 8. I'm probably about a 12 ounce, chewed up stomach size. I'm guessing. Somewhere in there. I hear a lot of people kind of cap out at like an 8. Again, I'm 6'2" and I'm male, and I think my metabolism runs a little hotter. I don't know if many people could probably get away with eating some of the quantity that I eat compared to a lot of bariatric surgery patients, but nevertheless, that's kind of what I can eat. I tend to still avoid carbs a little bit. I eat them more than I used to. I eat a little bit of, I got in a habit of eating a little more sugar when I was exercising a lot. I naturally don't eat that as much. I went through a phase where when I was running an hour a day, you're burning, I figure I was burning somewhere between 8 and 1,200 calories in a 1 hour, like a 5-6 mile run. And because of that, and because of the quantities I could eat, I got in a habit of eating ice cream just because they were just really big calories to make it so that I could not feel terrible and still exercise that much. Again, not necessarily wonderful, but I just needed a lot of calories and couldn't consume. So that was kind of a direction I went. It was not probably a great choice. But again, I seem to be doing okay. I think more about my vascular system when I say that's a bad idea, because it's certainly all the fat that's in ice cream and the sugar and the inflation and stuff that causes in your vascular system. I'm worried more about my heart probably than I am my weight at that point, because that's some family heredity stuff I've got to deal with as well. So I still, again, tend to avoid carbs more than most. I get asked about, like, what do I drink? I do not drink any alcohol, no coffee, no sugared drinks like soda pop, punch, anything like that. No soda of any kind. And unrelated to weight loss, I avoid caffeine just because I used to drink a lot of caffeine, and I developed like some pre-ventricular contraction stuff that I still feel once in a while, but caffeine exacerbates that. So really, when it comes to what I consume from a liquid standpoint, I stick to water, and when I'm feeling a little bit dehydrated, sometimes I'll drink G2, and I haven't read enough to have a valid reason of why I drink G2, other than I don't like zero products because they use a lot of these phenylkinetic products and weird things like I don't know, lots of artificial sweeteners I'm not a big fan of, but I think G2 still uses some plain old regular sugar, but just a little teeny bit of it, which I feel more comfortable with than chemicals sometimes. So that's the way I go, because it's like 40 calories or something like that, which I'm okay with. I think that's in my own mind, whether or not it doesn't have any science backing other than I feel more comfortable having 40 calories of sugar than the chemicals that are in the zeros. But hydration is something I've actually struggled with and didn't know I was struggling with it, probably since the time I had the surgery. I was always counseled from the time I had the surgery and even before that I really needed to consume about 80 ounces of hydration. And if you'll remember in some of my videos or commentary, I talked about being dizzy. That was something I suffered from. I actually thought that was a caloric problem, and it really was not a caloric problem. I recently figured out it was a hydration problem, even though I was getting what I thought was 80 ounces a day. Here's where I made some errors and might be something worth looking at for yourself. I've had to learn that I cannot count any calories that come from protein shakes. Protein shakes have a lot of material in them, and so a significant portion of those of the ounces you consume. So if for example, a Premier Protein shake's 11 ounces. A little less than half of that is mass that's in a liquid, and the liquid that's there isn't necessarily even pure water. It's other things, other materials and binders and stuff. So if you get into a habit where you're drinking 2 or 3 of those a day, which I was at one point, I was thinking I was consuming 33 ounces a day when I was probably really should have only been counting at best maybe 15 ounces of that as liquid. And my new thing is I don't count it at all. I don't count that as liquid. I just need to consume water on top of that. A nutritionist will also tell you that you should be drinking half of your weight in ounces every day. So even coming through the weight loss and after the weight loss, when I finally met my plateau, I'm still thinking I'm drinking 80 calories a day. I probably was somewhere in about 60, and I probably needed 100 to 110, somewhere between 100 and 110 ounces of water every day. And I was not doing that. And so what I would find is and then exercising also isn't factored in that. If you're running for, let's say, 30 minutes to an hour a day, you're sweating a lot on top of that, and you need to compensate for that. So again, 80 ounces wasn't enough for my weight and height. Exercising on top of that meant I needed more because I was sweating off a lot of water. And then on top of that, I was factoring in ounces from protein shakes that I shouldn't have been factoring in at all. And I think if you're mixing your own protein shakes with water, maybe you can count that a little easier because you know how much actual water is going into that. But with Premier Protein, it's anybody's guess how much mass is in there compared to pure water. So what I found was I continued to have, on occasion, these dizzy spells. And then at one point, I started having burning sensations, like when I would urinate. And I, the more you read about those kinds of things, it started pointing at hydration. Another symptom that I had is I started getting tonsillitis, which are these little tonsil stones. When you open your mouth in the back of your throat, sometimes you see these little white pebbles, and I read about that, and that was also hydration. So when I started having these burning sensations, which were not by any means urinary tract infections or anything like that, because they would go away if I just started chugging water, after a couple hours. I'd kind of flush things out and I'd be fine. And I think it was a combination of being dehydrated, and I love spicy food. So, if I went and dumped Tabasco sauce all over something, and then you don't have enough water in your system, you're basically burning your insides. So between that, the tonsillitis, and these dizzy spells, I think I learned that I've really been massively dehydrated the past year. So what do I do now? I basically use an Nalgene bottle that's got 32 ounces on it. I make sure I'm drinking 3 of those minimum per day. If you're like me, you probably have a bunch of water bottles around. I've also got a little 24-ounce Camelback little bottle, and I drink 4 of those. And that one actually is a little better because then I can get right to 100 ounces of water on top of my protein shake. every day, and that's without exercise. When I start exercising in another week, I know that I need to be even consuming more. I probably need to be doing a full gallon, 128 ounces per day, to feel good. And again, pay attention to your body, but be listening for any of those signs, any tonsillitis, dizziness, any of that stuff that was new to me, stuff I hadn't experienced before weight loss. Because back in the old days, I could just chug water and drinks and sodas, and I was probably doing at least a 44 ounce, Diet Coke, every single day, on top of probably consuming another 70, 80 ounces. I loved drinking a lot, but now you live in this world where you have to balance eating and drinking, and there's a 40 to an hour minute window after you eat before you can drink again, like drink well. And I just have to pay attention all the time. It is work. I will say, after all of this, the hydration is still the most work out of anything that I do. It's more work than even exercise. Exercise, when you do it, when you're going to get on. But getting water, you have to plan it out of how much you should be drinking. In fact, when I have my little 24-ounce water bottle, I'm thinking to myself in the morning, I've got to get 2 of these in really before I eat lunch. Because if I eat lunch, and if heaven forbid, I eat lunch a little bit late, then there's going to be this window where I'm not going to be able to drink for a while after lunch, and it could be 2:30 or 3 before I'm getting into my second half of my water for the day. And I don't want to be drinking a ton of water before bed. So I really want to have that 100 ounces in by about 6, 7 o'clock at night. So anyway, these are the things that I've been dealing with a little bit. But other than that, things are great. Going back to like what I eat and what I can eat anything. Somebody was asking me just the last few days, can I eat red meat? Yes, I can eat red meat. I can eat rice. I can eat sushi. I think once your stomach gets to an expansion point, you really start to feel even more so like a normal human being. But again, you just have limitations. I love the limitations that I have. I actually wish I had some of the restriction I had in the very beginning, because it was so easy to get full. I would take 4 bites of a meal and I'd be done. Like, I was totally finished. And now I'm back to where, I really can eat like my 13 and 17-year-old daughters, which is a pretty good place to be. They don't eat a ton of food. They can eat a sandwich, but, the Chick-fil-A sandwich right next to me and finish it, and they're in great shape. And I think that's what normal people would eat. In my old life, I would have eaten 2 Chick-fil-A sandwiches, a 44-ounce drink, and a large fry, and covered it all in the high-calorie sauces on top of that. And I would have eaten like that 3 meals a day. And so now, getting down to what is probably, I bet you I'm an 1,800 calorie a day diet. I'm not eating Chick-fil-A sandwiches every day. I think I said that earlier. I maybe eat a hamburger or a Chick-fil-A sandwich about once a month. Most of the time I just eat leftovers or something else that's home cooked. I've, again, targeting lower carb, lower sugar foods. I'll do things like I'll go to an Indian food place, and they'll do like a chicken curry or something over. I can have them do it like over. They have like a baked green beans, or they'll do it over some. I'm trying to think of that Texas little green bean like bugger they got. Okra. There's an Indian place that'll actually do curry over okra, which is actually pretty nice. And then sometimes cauliflower and things like that. And so it's a really nice way to go. There's a lot of Mexican restaurants have great salads that are, meat and lettuce and everything else. And I'll still let them put the beans in it, and I'll still let them put the, a little bit of rice in there, and I'll eat some of that. It's not a bad thing to have a mild amount of carbohydrates. The key is obviously to try to make them more complex carbohydrates and not just pure sugar, like the candy and stuff that I eat, which I shouldn't. But I really try not to go too overboard. But I think I'm doing okay. I certainly could do better. Anyway, uh, you've had your dose of pictures. Here's kind of how I've been for the past year. Just in closing, I would say I'm still just in awe of how amazing the procedure has been for me and how it's changed my life. As I've said in other videos, um, you know, uh, it enabled me to stop being a bystander to my own life and my kids' lives. Like just the things that we do and that I'm capable of doing um, are just not even comprehensible. Like it's very surreal because I spent my whole life watching other people do fun things as an obese person, and never in a million years thought like I would ever be able to do those things. And it's just absolutely amazing to feel like there are no limits to what I can do and the fun things I can do with my kids and family and um, just all of it. The confidence that comes from it has been phenomenal. Just little things like even just being a little more timid and shy. I don't feel like I'm quite as timid and shy anymore. It's amazing what obesity can do even just to your self-esteem. But nevertheless, just a lot's changed. I hope my personality hasn't changed too much. I feel like I'm still a nice person. In fact, I probably think of others more now than maybe I even used to, and it probably doesn't have anything to do with it, but I try to be kind and nice, and I think I mentioned that in my last video. Sometimes people go through these changes and they take the hurt that they have felt from others for their entire life and they really turn into awful people. That's one thing that if I could give any advice, it would be very cognizant of that. This isn't about revenge, and when you start looking nice and a certain level of being attractive, which I still don't really feel like I'm very attractive, but we still have our battles, right? But I've seen multiple instances, and not to pick sides or anything. It seems like it's more on the female side that having been picked on and made fun of or not been, asked out to the dance for all those years and for experiences well past that, there's an instinct of like some sort of revenge that, we feel like it's our turn to maybe start pointing at people and telling them what they should be eating and how they should be changing their lives, and maybe picking on people a little bit. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and I regretfully, and I have to check myself, I do sometimes when I see people who look the way that I used to look, that sometimes I do have to kind of watch myself, because I feel sometimes you think that, what, I made this choice and I was able to finally do something. Everybody else should too. And sometimes it's even in the mindset of like, I really wish I could give the gift of what I've had to other people, but I know I need to be careful because some of it might be some sort of emotional issues where I feel like because I did it, other people, if they're not doing it and they're just allowing themselves to be in that state of morbid obesity, that they're not doing themselves any favors. And in the back of my mind, there's some critical thought that I need to be careful of, and recognizing that it's not just that simple. There's insurance involved in it, and it's not necessarily the cheapest procedure. Again, if you've watched my videos, there are other options that are, in my book, affordable. One thing that I think I put in one of my videos, initially I was going to a different doctor who was in the United States. I did not have insurance coverage, and the cost was going to be over $20,000 to have the procedure, and money's money, and that's a bit of an expense. and it scared me a little bit, but I was still going to go down the road because I had a dear friend of mine tell me that he's like, Scott, you'll go out and you'll buy a new car, every 5 to 10 years, and that's going to cost about the same amount. You're going to pay that off over 5 years, and you really don't think, it's a big expense, and you're thoughtful about it because it's a car and it's got to last you a long time. But that's just a car. That's just a piece of metal that sits in the driveway, and you'll make that investment to buy that piece of metal that sits in the driveway. And he says, aren't you as a human being worth more than a stupid car? Like, wouldn't it be worth it for 5 years to drive a car that's not as nice, to pay for this procedure and finance it on your own? And that was a really, good counsel from a good friend. And that was when I was like ready to go. And I started working with the doctor and like, let's do this. And then it was in that same timetable as I kept looking at things. And I, again, I had a mentor that had done this 8 years before I did it. And I'd been watching his recovery and his weight gain afterwards. And he did really, really well. And he and I had a conversation one day, and he says, make sure you have the right doctor do this. And he talked about a few things that I've talked about in my videos about the way that everything from the shape of the cut to how they, whether or not they do the inverted method, which, it's been a few years. Hopefully everybody's doing that now. Maybe they're not. But that was when I really started looking at reviews everywhere, and that's how I found Dr. Ilan in Mexico, and just the people that had been to him loved him so much. And that was not necessarily a thing about money. The money was something I thought about, obviously, because I could have it done for about $5,000 instead of $20,000. But that wasn't the deciding point. It was that Dr. Ilan really was gifted in this procedure, and I still maintain, in looking back at that whole experience, having gone through multiple medical experiences in the United States, if that's anything that like scares people off, like don't let that be a factor. You'll see some crazy news stories and things about weight loss surgeries in Mexico. There was even some people here in the Salt Lake City area that some people died, because some guy was using like bacteria covered tools and hacking at people. Dr. Almaza or something, I can't even remember what his name was. But the experience I had with Dr. Ilan, and they used to be called Bariatric Pal. I think they changed their name to something that wasn't as confusing. It's like Bariatric Hospital or something, but it's still the same company and same doctor. But the hospital was the cleanest I've ever been in. The service was better than anything I'd ever had in the United States, and just as the other people I had read about and watched their blogs and everything, like I didn't have any issues whatsoever. My recovery was amazing. The weight stayed off. All of the things that Dr. Ilan told me about in conversations before the surgery that that were in contrast to things I had been told by my doctor here about the way that he did the surgery that would make my outcome better and eliminate factors like acid reflux and some of that I was told I would have no matter what. And then Dr. Ilan said, no, you won't, not if it's done right. And he did it right, and I didn't have acid reflux, and lots of great things. Anyway, if you're afraid of the money, it just so happens that I think the best doctor out there isn't even in the U.S. and is a much more affordable option. And money was no object to me in doing this. And I still did that. I didn't do it because it was cheaper. I did it because Dr. Ilan was the best when I did the reading that I did. So if that's something you're worried about, there's my 2 cents. I'd go back to him in a heartbeat. In fact, I tell myself today, if for some reason I can't manage my weight and it wants to start creeping back, in over the next 10 years or whatever, I'll go back to him again, and I'll have him do a mini bypass, which is a procedure I don't think many people do in the U.S., but it's a much less intrusive. You could call it a bypass light if you want to call it that. But I've seen people with great success there. But my intention is not to ever have to do anything again to manage it myself. But I wouldn't hesitate if you're looking for something that's more affordable. It just so happens that one of the best doctors in the world is more affordable than those in the U.S. Anyway, feel free to ask me questions. I think that's all I've got for today. Post your comments in the thread. We'll see you. Bye-bye.